SDCLC, I hope you guys are all doing well, staying safe and healthy. I'm happy to be here with you today or this evening or whenever you're watching this for lesson 21. This is Moses and the spies. So we'll just go ahead and pray and then we'll jump right in. God, I just thank you so much, Lord, that you're here, that your presence is with us. God, I pray that you would speak to us tonight. Would you just show us what you want us to know in your word? God, I thank you that your word says your word never returns void. So God, I just thank you that the verses that we're going to read today, the life of Moses, this portion of his life that we're going to learn about, God, I thank you that it's going to produce a good fruit in our lives. God, there's going to be lessons that we can learn and take away from Moses. And God, we just pray that you would reveal that to us. You would show us what those are. God, I thank you for your goodness. I thank you for your faithfulness. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys. So we are on lesson, yes, I said that already, lesson 21. So we'll just go ahead and start. So it says, what happened with Moses and the children of Israel before they left Mount Sinai? A, Moses ascended the mountain for the second giving of the law. So your blank is second. Okay. Number 1, this time Moses was to cut the stones for the tablets. So let's read Exodus, I'll read it to you, Exodus 34, 1 through 4. And the Lord said to Moses, cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. So be ready in the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself to me there on the top of the mountain. And no man shall come up with you, and let no man be seen throughout all the mountain. Let neither flocks nor herds feed before that mountain. So he cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. Then Moses rose early in the morning and went up Mount Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him. And he took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. Number 2. This time, God revealed himself to Moses in a more personal way. Your blank is personal. Number 3, this time Moses pleaded with God to travel among them, even though they did not deserve it. Your blank is deserve it. Number 4, this time God made a covenant with Moses to bring them into the land and drive out the Canaanites before them with miraculous displays of his power. Number 5, this time God warned about making any compromises with the people of the land. Let's read that, Exodus 34, 11 through 12. Observe what I command you this day. Behold, I am driving out from before you the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. Take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you are going, lest it be a snare in your midst. So he was warning them about making compromises with the people that were in the land. Number 6, this time God commanded that they stay clear of idolatry and fully destroy all traces of pagan worship. So your blank was idolatry. Number 7, this time God reminded them to keep the feast of unleavened bread, which is Passover. And number 8, this time Moses remained in the presence of the Lord another 40 days and 40 nights. It says in Exodus 34, 27 to 28, then the Lord said to Moses, write these words, for according to the tenor of these words I have made a covenant with you in Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. All of these things are the things that you would expect if the next step was to enter into the promised land. So B, we'll just move on into B. B says Moses came down from the mountain with the tablets of stone. Exodus 34:29 says, now it was so, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hands when he came down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. Whoa, that's so powerful just to think, because he was like with God, his face was shining when he came down. So number 1 says Moses came down with his face shining with a supernatural glow. This is not something that happened as a result of Moses' first 40-day visit to the mountain. The people were actually frightened by this. So they saw his face and they were like, ah, they were scared. Often when man is confronted with the holiness of God, it makes them uncomfortable. Whoa. So I think that's just an example of that, right? He came down after having spent time with God. His face was still shining and the people were uncomfortable. They were scared. Number 2, Moses delivered the commands to the people. Number 3, Moses put a veil on his face except when he was in the presence of God. Let's read Exodus 34, 33 to 35. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And he would come out and speak to the children of Israel whatever he had been commanded. And whenever the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, then Moses would put on his veil again until he went in to speak with him. Oh, and then there's just a special note that says, because of the blending accounts of Exodus and Numbers, it's difficult to establish the order of the following events. So C says Moses led the workers in building the tabernacle and its furnishings, taking an offering and erecting the tabernacle. D, Moses did an official census of the people. Let's read that. Numbers 1 through 40. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, that it says it in Numbers 1 through 46, but I'm just going to read the first 3 verses of that. Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of meeting, on the first day of the 2nd month in the 2nd year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel, by their families, by their father's house, according to the number of names, every male individually, from 20 years old and above, all who are able to go to war in Israel. You and Aaron shall number them by their armies. So the total census of men 20 years old and above came to 603,550 without the Levites. And then the total number of Levites added another 22,000. However, these included all the males of all ages. E, the Levites were excluded, your blank was excluded, from the initial census and appointed over the service of the tabernacle. In Numbers 2:33 it says, but the Levites were not numbered among the children of Israel, just as the Lord commanded Moses. F, God gave Moses instructions about how they were to travel and how they were to camp. Okay, number 1, and we're just going to go through those directions. They traveled and camped under their tribal banner. 2, there was an order for their travel. There are a couple interpretations here. So sometimes the ark led the way, as we saw in Numbers 10:33, and sometimes Judah led the way with the ark near the front in Numbers 10:14 and 17. 3, there was order in the camp. There was an order in the camp. So they camped, and then these are more of your blanks. A says they camped with God in the midst. That's from Numbers 2:17. B, the camped viewed from heaven formed a cross. Whoa, I thought that was so cool. I love how God's so intentional. Like every single thing has so much meaning. So if you look in your appendix, I was trying to open this, but I'm not wanting to open. Isn't that so powerful? So that was the formation in their camp. I love that. Where were we? G, so we did B. The camp The camp viewed from heaven formed a cross. G, the Levites and Aaron's family were appointed to the various functions relative to the service of the tabernacle. H, God gave additional instructions to the people regarding several things. So these are additional things God was instructing them about. 1, the redemption of the firstborn. 2, the laws concerning leprosy. 3, additional laws concerning unfaithfulness in marriage. 4, the Nazirite vow. And 5, silver trumpets. I, Moses and the people kept the Passover. Okay, we're on to Roman numeral 2. It says, what events transpired on their journey between Mount Sinai and Kadesh Barnea? A, the children of Israel embarked on a 3-day journey. That's your blank. 3-day journey, following the direction of the Lord through the Ark of the Covenant. B, the children of Israel went forward, murmuring all the way. So it says as a side note that you guys already discussed most of the murmurings in lesson 12 when we talked about the 10 tests of the Israelites in the wilderness. But we're just going to go through what they were complaining about, what they were murmuring about at this point in their journey. 1, they complained about a lack of meat. 2, Moses complained about the burden being too large for him. So these are some side notes that I want to just share because I think they're really helpful to the understanding of this passage of scripture. Moses had come to the end of himself, leading this murmuring people. Notice Moses' questions. Why have you afflicted your servant? Why have I not found favor in your sight? Why have you laid this burden of the people on me? Where am I to get meat to feed all these people? And then it says underneath, that sounds like a lot of pastors on a bad day. In this case, God instructed Moses to gather 70 men who would be able to lead with him. So that just reminds me of even our church, how we have different leaders that help the pastors lead. So it's not just them carrying all the weight. There's people that come alongside and take different roles in leadership. Number 3, Miriam and Aaron complained about Moses' leadership. Numbers 12, 1 through 16. Let's read verse 1 through 2. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. So they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Okay, I want to read this little paragraph here. So it says, this does not seem to be an apt description of Zipporah, who was a Midianite, the daughter of Jethro. It is probable that it does refer to Zipporah, who was evidently of darker complexion. Most commentators seem to agree that this was a racially motivated reference to Zipporah. Others raise the question whether or not Zipporah had died and Moses took another wife, or that Moses may have taken a second wife from the mixed multitude that came out with them. Polygamy was not uncommon in those days. So it sounds like it's debatable which one it was. A, God seemed to judge. Oh, I have a bug. I'm sorry. I live in the wilderness and sometimes there's bugs. Okay, got it. Sorry, awkward. Okay, back to the notes. A, God seemed to judge Miriam more severely. Evidently, she was the ringleader of this rebellion. She is mentioned first and dealt with more harshly. B, Aaron once again demonstrated his weak, your blank is weak, leadership. He followed the persuasions of his sister, just as he had given in to the demands of the people in the matter of the golden calf. C, Moses interceded for them to minimize God's judgment. C, big letter C. God instructed Moses to send spies into the land. So it says in Numbers 13, verses 1 to 2, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. These spies were to be notable leaders from their tribe. So Moses sent them out from the wilderness of Paran according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the children of Israel. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. Oh, I just read that. All of them were leaders of the Israelites, just a different version. 2, there were 12 spies, each representing one of the 12 tribes. There is some debate as to who the spies were. When you compare the passage in Deuteronomy, it seems that the spies were sent at the suggestion of the people and Moses' approval. The only way to reconcile these accounts is to put the incident in the following order. The people suggested that spies go in. Moses took the matter before the Lord. God agreed to give the people their request and commissioned Moses to send them out. This could be similar to the account of Jethro's advice, later being the same advice that God gave to Moses regarding the appointing of additional leadership to help him shepherd the people. So 3, Roman numeral 3. What was the purpose of sending spies into the land of promise? A, Moses sent the spies in at the approval of the Lord. Their blank was approval. B, Moses made it clear what their specific purpose would be. I'm going to read this 3 verses to you. It's Numbers 13, 17 to 20. Then Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, "Go up this way into the south and go up to the mountains and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are forests or not. Be of good courage and bring some fruit of the land." Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So number 1, I don't think you have any of these blanks, but again, I think it's important for us to read them to understand the context of what's going on. They were to go up to the mountains and see what the land was like. Number 2, they were to see whether the people were strong or weak. Number 3, they were to see whether the people were few or many. Number 4, they were to see whether the land was good or bad. Number 5, they were to see whether the cities were like camps or strongholds. They were to see whether the land was rich or poor. They were to see if there were forests or not, and they were to bring back some fruit. So those were their very specific instructions that they were given. Okay, what happened when the spies came back from the land? A, the spies went out as Moses instructed them. B, the spies gathered figs and pomegranates, and they cut down a cluster of grapes that was so large that it took 2 men to carry it. Whoa, I can't even imagine that. Wow. C, the spies returned to give a report of their factual findings. After 40 days of spying out the land, the spies returned with a report. 1, they reported the good news first. Then they told him, and they said, "We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit." Numbers 13:27. 2, they reported the bad news after that. Numbers 13:28 to 29. So this was the bad news that they reported. "Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan." Both of these observations were factual to this point. D, the spies shared their interpretation of the facts. Number 1, Caleb gave his interpretation. Then Caleb quieted the people of Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." So perhaps Caleb is the one doing the speaking here because Joshua already had a reputation of siding with Moses. So Caleb may have had more sway with the people, being considered more of like a neutral party. 2, the vast majority of spies gave quite another interpretation. So let's read their interpretation. It's from Numbers 13:31 to 33. But the men who had gone up with them said, "We are not able to go against the people, for they are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw giants, like the descendants of Anak, came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." So not only did they give a bad report, they exaggerated the report even further to inspire fear. There is no record that anyone had actually interviewed a giant to see how they felt. Had they done so, they might have had a different story. This is interesting. So it says, spiritual maturity is not just knowing the facts, but it is interpreting the facts with a divine perspective. So then it says Rahab said to the two spies sent in by Joshua. This is what Rahab said. "I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath." So that was Rahab speaking to two of the spies. So when the spies came back, what happened? The people chose to listen to, your blank is listen to, the negative interpretation. Numbers 14, 1 through 4. "So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept all night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, 'If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?' So they said to one another, 'Let's select a leader and return to Egypt.'" Whoa. Here we have another example of how democracy and church decisions can keep us from our land of promise. So here's 5 things that the people were doing, right? The people wept, number 1. Number 2, the people complained against Moses. 3, the people questioned the Lord's motive. 4, the people decided they needed a leadership change, so just like on their own. 5, the people decided to go back to Egypt. F, Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in front of the people. In Numbers 14:5, they were trying to convince them not to be swayed by what they saw with their eyes, but to focus on God who had worked for them in the past. Wow, I think that can really speak to what we're going through right now. Side note, quick little side note here. I think it can be so easy for us to watch the news and it is real and it is intense and what's happening is horrible and so sad. But I think this verse right here and this little explanation of it just reminds me that we have to remember what God has done for us in the past. We have to remember trials and tribulations that he's brought us through and he's brought us out of. Because I think like when you're going through the hard time, it can be hard to do everything it can be easy to do everything that they're doing. It can be easy to complain. It can be question God's motive, to feel like we need a new leader. It can be easy to do all those things. But I think our key is to focus on God who had worked for us in the past. If we keep our focus on God, keep remembering, you know what? He delivered me from this. He delivered me from that. He rescued me from this. I didn't have food one time and he showed up with food. He sent food to me. Like, think of, if you recount all the ways that God showed up in your life, I think that will that can help refocus us when we might feel overwhelmed at what we see going on around us. Just wanted to share that. G, Joshua and Caleb appealed to the congregation. Let me read that to you, Numbers 14, 6 through 9. But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, "The land we passed through to spy out is exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." So, very interesting method. They tore their own clothes. They reminded people of the goodness and richness of the promise of God. I love that. They cautioned people about rebellion and fear. H, the people indicated a desire to stone Joshua and Caleb. Wow. It says in Numbers 14:10a, and all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. So now we're going to look at God's response to everything that's happening when we look at Roman numeral 5. How did God react to the response of the people? First, I want to see how we're doing time-wise. We're doing great. A, God came down in his manifest presence. B, God indicated that he was ready to judge them immediately. In Numbers 14:11 through 12, then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will these people reject me? And how long will they not believe me? With all the signs which I have performed, I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they." So, oh, my throat's dry. He was, number one, he was ready to strike them with pestilence. 2, he was ready to disinherit them. He was ready to start again with Moses. C, Moses interceded once again for the people. So your blank is interceded. D, God indicated that he would pardon them. Your blank is pardon. E, God indicated that there would be consequences of their lack of faith and stubbornness. Okay, let me read this to you in Numbers 14:22 to 23. Sorry, because we're not in real time. Otherwise, I'd be having all of you read. So you just got to keep hearing me read it. "Because of all these men who have seen my glory and all the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now 10 times, and have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me to see it." Wow. Did I read that already? E, I think I did. God indicated that there would be consequences. So those are the consequences that I just read in that verse. Number 1, God indicated that all of the people that were 20 years old and up would not enter the land, but would die in the wilderness. Wow. I'm going to read that verse to you guys. Actually, why don't you pause the video? I'm going to let you guys read it. Pause the video, and then you can read it yourself. So go ahead and pause. Oh, I didn't tell you the verse. I'm so sorry. Numbers 14:31 to 35. Okay, so I'm going to read you a note about that verse that you just read. This would include all those who had been counted in the first census. It is ironic that the children that had been the most concerned about in the face of giants, let me read that again. It is ironic that the children that they had been the most concerned about in the face of giants would be the very ones who would enter in by faith. These parents, however, would never see the land. Wow, these are the very intense consequences that were laid out by God. A, their carcasses would fall in the wilderness. Their children would be shepherds in the wilderness. C, their children would bear the brunt of their unfaithfulness. D, they would wander for 40 years, 1 year, for every day they spied out the land. I love all these notes again because I think it just gives us more insight. So I'm going to keep reading them. Hopefully we're all good to keep on moving. So most expositors agree that this 40-year sentence is most likely inclusive of time served in the wilderness thus far, which would amount to about 1.5 years, meaning that in the next 38.5 years, at least 1.2 million people would die if no children died in any of the subsequent plagues. Since there were 605,000 men, and most likely an equal number of women in this number, this would mean that during this 38.5-year period, an average of approximately 85 people died each and every day. Wow. The New Testament refers to this incident as rebellion or the day of trial. So in Hebrews 3:7 through 19, it says, "Therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as in the rebellion in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tested me, tried me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore, I was angry with that generation and said, they always go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Beware, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from living God, but exhort one another daily, which while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end. While it is said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion." Verse 16, "For who, having heard, rebelled? Indeed, was it not all who came out of Egypt led by Moses? Now, with whom he was angry 40 years, was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest? But to those who did not obey. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief." Number 2, God indicated that Caleb and Joshua would enter in because of a spirit of faith. So it says in Numbers 14, verse 24, "But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring him into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it." So based on Joshua 14:1, which mentions Eleazar, who was Aaron's son and successor, who functioned as a high priest in the promised land, some have suggested Eleazar may have also gone in as a member of an older generation. And on that basis, there have been suggestions made that all the Levites may have been exempted from this judgment. They suggest this for the following reason. A, the Levites were not included in the original census. B, the Levites were not numbered in relationship to going to war. C, the Levites had been loyal to Moses in the golden calf incident. And D, the Levites did not have a representative spy going into the land. F, God brought a plague on the 10 spies that gave an evil report and they died. So that was in Numbers 14:36 to 38. I'll let you pause and read that one. It's Numbers 14:36 to 38. You could pause. Ready? All right. So it's actually worthy of noting here that when Joshua later led the people into the promised land, he also sent spies into the land to bring a report. However, he only sent 2 spies, and that's in Joshua 2, verse 1. Okay, we're almost there. So what was the people's response to God's judgment? A, they mourned greatly. Your blank was mourned. B, they acknowledged their sin now. When they faced the consequences, they changed their mind and wanted to go in. C, Moses warned them not to proceed or they would be defeated by their enemies. Numbers 14:41 to 43, and Moses said, "Now why do you transgress the command of the Lord? For this will not succeed. Do not go up, lest you will be defeated by your enemies. For the Lord is not among you, for the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and you shall fall by sword, because you've turned away from the Lord. The Lord will not be with you." So this note says, in our life of faith, there are doors of opportunity that God opens to us that are consistent with his will and purpose and are accompanied by a supernatural grace to enter in. Unfortunately, these opportunities can close just as quickly, and we can miss our opportunity or our day of visitation. D, they presumed to go forward anyway, as predicted, and they were defeated. So they presumed, it says in Numbers 14:44-45, but they presumed to go up to the mountaintop. Nevertheless, neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses departed from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that mountain came down and attacked them and drove them back as far as Hormah. The sin of presumption here was the Israelites expecting God's protection when they were walking in disobedience to God's clear command. Number 1, they were defeated because now they were moving in disobedience. 2, they were defeated because they moved forward without their leader, Moses. 3, they were defeated because the ark of God did not go with them. So it just says that there's actually other incidents where people tried to move ahead presumptuously. The Egyptians tried to cross the Red Sea through the door open for the Israelites, and the Israelites attempted to conquer Ai without directions from the Lord. Both had dismal consequences. So that can just teach us that when we are in disobedience to God, we're not going to have that same protection, and that is just a very clear illustration of that. Last question. What happened in the end? God directed them back into the wilderness. In Numbers 14, verse 25, it says, now the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valley. Tomorrow turn and move out into the wilderness by way of the Red Sea. Remember, the Red Sea is where this all started. They were so close to entering in, and now they have to go all the way back and start again. Wow. That, my friends, that was lesson 21. And I thank you so much. And I will see you again for lesson 22.